Spider-Man shows are a huge part of everyone's childhood. Even if you didn't watch the show in full, you probably have seen at least an episode or part of it. So when Marvel comes out with its new animated show about Spider-Man, it has a lot to live up to. And with the season finale having just aired, let's talk about it. Now there will be spoilers ahead, so come back after you have watched it. It's very good. In episode 9, Norman goes to visit Doc Ock in prison and begins taunting him, just to enrage him even more. Then we see Peter face off against the Scorpion, but this time, he has the classic blue and red suit. And as the Scorpion attacks, Big D, like the great leader he is, runs away, leaving Lonnie and the others behind. So Lonnie steps up and decides to fight the Scorpion, hand to hand. And he breaks into the truck transporting Ock's weapons away. And one of these mysterious gas canisters explode and Lonnie inhales them, and he's now practically indestructible. And he's slowly turning into the Tombstone we all know. He then teams up with Peter and the two beat Scorpion. Peter then hears the voice of Norman in his head telling him that with great power comes great respect, and he's about to kill the Scorpion. But Lonnie steps in and calms Peter down, Tobey Maguire style.
Gonna cry?
It's pretty ironic that a future villain is the one calming him down, but nevertheless, this was a good scene. Peter and Nico finally make up after so long. Then we see that Norman is doing sinister things.
Say that again?
We saw that last week after Peter had been almost killed by the Scorpion, some of the doctors took his blood, and it turns out that the Oscorp scientists are using this to make even more radioactive spiders. Plus they are improving upon the glider technology that's in Norman Osborn's glider. Then Peter is back to being your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man with Harry's help, and as always he's late to school. It turns out however that the internship at Oscorp was just Norman trying to get a bunch of super genius teenagers to build him a wormhole so that he can assert dominance in the cosmos. And everyone is super against it. Doctor Strange then arrives and warns Norman not to open it, but Norman doesn't listen and opens a wormhole straight to a symbiote planet, and then this symbiote monster is the same one we saw in episode 1 when Peter got his powers. Whilst Peter and Strange try to stop the beast, Strange accidentally opens a portal to the past, and this leads to the events we saw in episode 1 with Peter's bite. Peter manages to successfully close off the wormhole after Strange held back the symbiotes, but a bit of the symbiote remains to be explored in season 2 and 3. Then we see that Oscorp has pretty much been damaged to bits after this, and none of the interns really want to go back to Norman after he broke their trust. So Peter and Nico convince Harry to start a company called Worldwide Engineering Brigade, or WEP, and his plan is to hire these genius teenagers without exploiting them to make evil stuff. We see that Asher is willing to join, Lonnie is also potentially going to join, but he's also now the boss of the 1/10, and he's slowly turning into the grey stone-like look that Tombstone normally has. Amadeus Cho weirdly was the only one who wasn't against the wormhole, and he's still working for Oscorp, and perhaps in a higher position than he was before. And Jean was actually Finesse, a secret spy for Daredevil, explaining how he broke in last week. And Peter and Strange then meet up and begin to talk about the time traveling incident, and Peter asks if he can know the future, but like how Strange watched Endgame and Infinity War but didn't spoil it to anyone, he also doesn't spoil season 2 or 3 of the show, but says that Peter is ready for whatever comes next. Also the Watcher is here watching, which is cool I guess. And then we see Norman find the symbiote. Whether he becomes a version of Venom or the symbiote is what makes him evil, we don't know, we would just have to wait and see. Doc Ock also fantasizes about his 4 extra arms, and we see May visit Richard Parker, Peter's dad, in prison, which was a shock twist that I didn't see coming. Now I know I've said this every week, but this show is amazing because it's so well written, and the fact that from the start it knew that it was going to be a multiple season run helps this show so much. Every question we have ever had or any loose ends that the show put forward have all more or less been answered, and it also perfectly sets up the second season with loads of questions that we want to get answered. I mean, it is a bit on the nose with every setup, but every show does this when it's trying to set up the next season, so it's not that bad. The characterization of the cast is also so perfect because we see them develop as people whilst also seeing how clear their ambitions are, and it has you excited for what's coming next. For example, Norman Osborn is one of the most interesting characters in both the comics and the movies.
You know how much I sacrificed?
Because sometimes he's evil and is ready to completely destroy Peter's life, and sometimes he's good, and that's what makes his character so interesting and likable. And this show perfectly embodies that, whether it be through the voice acting with Coleman Domingo or just how he acts. Like at some points it seems like he genuinely cares for Peter, but in other cases his ambition seems to get the best of him. Peter's journey is also interesting because we see him come to terms with being a hero, then facing defeat, and then how he comes back from that, and how he's learning about the responsibility that comes with great power, although they don't come right out and say it, which I am annoyed at, but there will be a better moment when he gets the line and probably makes more thematic sense, like they did with No Way Home. Since this is MCU adjacent, it will probably be around the same point. Perhaps Richard Parker might be the one to say it. Also, that Richard Parker reveal was wild, because Does this mean that Richard Parker is also imprisoned in the MCU, since this show is MCU adjacent, or is it just in this universe? Also, Peter's dad could be this guy in that picture that Norman showed with Octavius, and Norman could be taking out the competition. Yes, that would be a repeat of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it was still an interesting idea that they put forth in that movie. We also get to see the return of Daredevil and Doctor Strange, and it's always great to see them. I was kind of annoyed that Strange was only there for a few minutes in episode 1, but we get more of him here, and I do wish we get to see Peter properly team up with Daredevil, rather than them fighting each other. But that's probably something we'll see in the coming season. The time travel element in this is also really cool, and it does go full circle as a show, but it just completely breaks the time travel logic put forth in Endgame, because shouldn't them going back in time create a branched timeline rather than it being something that always happened? And Lonnie's character arc is amazing as well. I'm really hoping that he doesn't turn bad, but at the same time it seems like that's where stuff is heading. And for once is like an emotional connect to the villain in a show, which the other Disney Plus shows just don't really have. And as for the animation, it doesn't really bother me too much, because once you get hooked into the plot, you won't notice. Like, it's a similar thing with... But overall, episode 9 and 10 get an 8.5 out of 10. As for the show overall, this felt like a refreshing new take on a Spider-Man show, cooked up by Spider fans, because every other Spider-Man shows have the same cliches that even if you ask a 4-year-old what Spider-Man's origins are, they could tell it to you with their eyes closed whilst also hanging upside down. Also, introducing MCU characters that Peter has interacted with makes this show so special, and so anytime he does speak to other heroes, it's always great to see. Like, I do miss MJ and Gwen and everyone else, but who knows, we might get them later down the line. But seeing this new team is also great. Comparing this to the other Marvel animation shows, this is definitely the best. What If sort of just became a mess towards the later seasons, and it wasn't something that was just exciting to watch, rather it was something I watched for the sake of completion. And X-Men 97 was a good show, but it mainly did bank on you having watched the original show, which I haven't, so it doesn't hit the same for me as it would for everyone else. And so the show overall gets an 8.5 out of 10. It's an amazing show, and I need season 2 like yesterday. Do comment below your thoughts and subscribe whilst you're there.
Deuces. Parker out.